Today is Thursday, June 26th of 2025. This is Sarah Franklin interviewing Dave Littlehales for the Theodore Corbett Institute for Running History Research's Roadrunners Club New York Association Oral History Project. Dave, thanks for taking some time to speak with me today. To start, could you just introduce yourself and provide some biographical info, like your birth date, birthplace, and a bit about yourself as a kid growing up in New York?
All right, certainly. My name is David Littlehales. Call me Dave. I've been a long-time runner, now race walker. Born in Philadelphia back in 1949. I guess that makes me an old guy now.
Yeah. It's all
Nonetheless,
relative.
still moving along the best I can. I've been involved with the sport since I was 12 years old, starting in junior high school in track, cross country, then in high school, collegiate track and field. And during that time, during even my high school time, I was getting involved in road racing, which is still my first love. And from that time on, I've done everything from a mile run, or 880, I should say, all the way up to 100 miles now. I'm 76 now, and I'm only tapering down to about 5 or 10 Ks, but at least I got my heart ticking and my legs moving.
Still getting out there. Yeah, that's what matters.
Right.
So you were born in Philly. When did you move to New York, and whereabouts in the city did you live?
Didn't live in the city. Age 6, my dad got a new job in Manhattan, and we moved to Levittown, New York. We were only there for a year on Long Island, and then moved to nearby Wantagh, near Jones Beach, for those who are not familiar with Wantagh.
Hmm.
Went to high school there, all the way through high school, ran track, cross country, indoor track. I was blessed with a fantastic coach, Mike Burns, who is well known in the scholastic community. I learned a lot from him about interval training in particular. And while there, and we'll get to this later, I met my friend Glenn McCarthy, who was instrumental in getting me involved in road running. From there, I went to the University of Delaware.
So Blue Hens.
The Blue Hen. Wow, you're good.
One of the random ones I know.
Well, you're good. So yeah, and I ran track and cross country there as well, indoor track, for a couple of years, and then I focused entirely on my road racing.
And what got you started? You said you were running in middle school. What got you started, from day one? What was your impetus to run?
It's funny. I mentioned my track coach. He was also my social studies teacher, and very observant, I must say, because he came in seventh grade, first day of class. He says, "Littlehales, I've seen you running all around town." And since he was the track coach, he says, "Now I want you to report this afternoon to the high school and come out and we'll give you your gear for cross country." And I'm saying, "You didn't ask me. You didn't ask for, if I wanted to do it." He says, "That's okay. Just show up." So I asked my mom about it. She says, "It's good for you. You get out there, get some fresh air, meet some people, do it." So that started me.
Wow.
It's kind of a strange thing. I was like picked out. I don't know why he wanted me to do it, other than the fact he saw me running around the neighborhood.
It's a very auspicious start, I guess.
And weird.
Yeah, wow. And then can you talk a little bit more about your high school experience, your coach, Mike Burns, like you said, and what distances you were running, if you had any, rivals or competitors, just what was your high school running like?
Uh, at Wantagh High School, track, cross country was like the key sport. Most sport, college, high schools go for their basketball teams or their football teams. We had pretty good teams, but we had outstanding cross country and track. I think due largely to Mike Burns, my coach. He had us running like interval workouts that probably rivaled Igloy at that point in time. We were running the same workouts as the top flight runners like Jim Beatty and Jim Grell and all those other people, who are adults and world class runners. So we ran the same workouts ostensibly as the varsity track team, even in junior high school. And, it was pretty onerous, but it got us in shape. It was highly disciplined. And so starting out in cross country, I didn't know what to expect per se. But I did pretty well, especially in seventh and eighth grader. I had a lull in my freshman year. I don't know why I didn't do as well. But through varsity track and so forth, we ran everything from the 880, now 800 meters, of course, to in school, the 2 mile. Um, Back in those days, cross country, Sarah, was about 2.5 miles. I think today I understand it's usually about 3 or 5K for boys. But in those days, we ran them at Salisbury Park, now Eisenhower State Park on Long Island, and Valley Stream State Park. And those were the two main venues, although we did have them at our own high school.
And was cross country your go-to event? Did you prefer that over the track?
Yes, I did for two reasons. One, I thought I liked the variety. I liked the course variety, and I also liked it because I learned early that the longer I ran, compared to my own like times and so forth, the better I did.
Hmm.
So I knew that I was going to be a distance runner, and I did not very well with 400 or anything like that. So I gravitated towards the distances, which actually laid the groundwork for my involvement in the Roadrunners Club, which I started to participate in when I was in high school. I did my first road race was when I was a ninth grader. It was a summertime, and my coach took me to I think it was called the Chippewa Club in Yonkers, New York, and it was 3 times a 5K, a loop course on the roads. And to my surprise, I averaged pretty good time. I mean, how do you compare anything to others? But for that point in time, I was surprised myself. Strangely enough, though, what I did was I didn't have the proper shoes other than my old like Keds or something. So what I did is I took my Adidas spikes and I screwed out the spikes and I ran the
Oh my
15K
goodness. Yeah,
in
wow.
those.
Wow.
Yeah. So it had a really hard plate in front,
Yeah.
which now has maybe come full time around with the carbon plating.
Just need a little foam on either side, but yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, I made it. And that got me really hooked into wanting to do more.
And how did you find out about the Roadrunners Club? Did you like see flyers around town? How did you get around in those days?
In two ways, I had a brush up against it back through that time. They used to have also a summer series in Victory Park, I think it was, in Queens. And they had a 2 mile and a 2.5 mile. And I started to meet some of the road runners at that point in time. And then I saw, what is this thing, the road runners, But my friend Glenn McCarthy, who was my high school mate until he moved to New York City during his junior year in high school, I think it was, he got more involved in it. And he reported back to me about what the club was, what their goals were, how I might be interested in it. And he shared his own interest in it. So at that point in time, I started saying, okay, I'd like to do it too. So I would go into New York City in my junior and senior years, particularly stay over at his house, and then we would go to the races on Sunday. Now, this is quite interesting because I was running high school track, cross country, and then also doing the road races.
Hmm.
So I would always show up on my track workouts, my cross country workouts, dead tired on Monday, because when the rest of the team was resting on Sunday, I was doing a 10 miler or a 25K with the New York Road.
Yeah.
And so my coach said, why are you so tired? And I had to fess up and tell him what was going on.
Yeah. How did that go?
Not well,
Yeah.
not well.
What are your priorities?
I actually thought he'd be very happy with my enthusiasm.
Right, like you're going above and beyond, but
Right.
maybe to
But
the
that wasn't
detriment
the
of the
case.
team.
Yeah, he says you're jeopardizing the team, which led me to my senior year of finally resigning from the team in cross country because I had the goal that I was going to do the Boston Marathon,
Oh wow.
and I trained on my own. It's my
Wow.
senior year.
So was that when were you running up at Macombs Dam Park for a lot of that time?
Absolutely, yeah. Essentially, Macombs Dam Park, a little bit of Alley Pond in Queens, but almost all on Sedgwick Avenue and up around that way, the old NYU campus, I guess it was, along the Parkway. Then we had the races around Yankee Stadium that would have been referenced to by that film that you sent me, and thank you for that, by the way. And then there was this race that was not on either one of those courses called the Henry E. Isola 4.25 mile. And what that was 4 times a mile and 110 yards around a kind of like a warehouse district.
Hmm.
And they always held it like at the coldest weekend of the month of the year. in February. And I remember being shivering there trying to get to the starting line. And then they had a race too. I don't know if they have it anymore, called the Milk Run. It was a 25K race that was in Central Park. Probably one of the first races that was really utilizing the park. And that was maybe 1965, six, somewhere in there.
So can you just describe your memories of Macombs Dam Park? Like, we'll start with the locker room. I mean, it was
Oh,
hardly a locker room, but it was a place to be. Can you just kind of talk about that, just as base camp, as it were, for a bunch of those runs?
well, sure. Now, being a suburban kid from Long Island, when I came into the Bronx to Yankee Stadium with my friend Glenn, he brought me there the first time to Macombs Dam Park. Honestly, I was scared. All these people who I was unfamiliar with, and the noise of the city and everything. I wasn't exposed to that much. But when I got over to this, walked for about 400 yards over to the locker room, all of a sudden I felt myself at home, because I found myself with kindred spirits. I remember walking in, and Glenn came in right before me, and Joe Kleinerman, who pretty much ran the races, monitored them, said, "Glenn McCarthy is here, Glenn McCarthy." And he would announce every runner that came through. And I said, wow, look at that. He has the same importance as John Garlip or Dr. Sheehan, whoever. And then he said, he says, "What's your name?" Dave Littlehales. "Littlehales is here. Littlehales." And I'm going, oh my God, he doesn't even know me. And he's announcing me, you know? And it was like, honestly, an ego boost that who's this little kid from Long Island, 16 years old, that's being incorporated into this running community. So I felt a sense of inclusion there, Sarah. It was not a sense of like I'm coming into something entirely foreign in any way. And the locker room itself, everybody would lined up. And in those days, people would usually, almost exclusively, I should say, wear their street clothes to the race rather than their athletic attire. And you bring a bag, and then people would change right there and get all your athletic attire. And I remember in those days, people used to put on hot salve and like Bengay and all this stuff, and you could smell the smell of the locker room and the chatter and everything. And these people, it was a small community, you know, I would say on these races back then, 40 or 50 people maximum. And so everybody knew everybody. It was like a family, actually. And they talked about their training during the week, what was going on. There was a gentleman named Bill Coyne, who was like maybe at that point in time 30 years older than me. And somehow my locker was always next to his. We didn't have assigned lockers, but it just worked out that way. And he would give me great tips. And I would look to him to say, you know, see what he was wearing on a cold day. What kind of layers was he wearing? And I kind of like followed his lead because he was usually right. But he was a guy who was not a top flight runner by any sense of imagination. But he was somebody who I could relate to, and somebody who could share that running experience on the roads, especially, and how to approach the roads.
Do you remember the various courses that you ran, starting and ending at Macombs? You mentioned being on Sedgwick ad, excuse me, but I know, like, we'll get the Cherry Tree Marathon later, but and just any of the, you know, run of the mill routes that you guys were doing on a weekend.
Yeah, the ones that ran up along the Major Deegan Expressway there, they were kind of scary. I mean, we had cars zipping up and down, and really no police support at all, except maybe an intersection or two. The various courses I remember was everything from about 5 miles, 5.3 miles, something like that, all the way up to the marathon, the old Cherry Tree Marathon. There were a couple of 20 milers I ran, 16 milers. It seemed to be that there was always miles, except for a few designated kilometer races, but pretty much always measured in miles. I should mention too at that time that I was very proud to be a part of the measuring team. Ted Corbett, Ron Dawes in Minneapolis, and a couple other people were involved in the measuring committee. And I, strangely enough, as an 8-year-old, 8th grader, my parents asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I wanted a measuring wheel, surveyor's wheel. So my parents ordered it for me, got it, and because I had it, I got it calibrated with a steel tape that Ted Corbett had. And I was involved, again, 13 years old, 14 years old, no, even a little older than that after I got involved, but maybe like 16, measuring the courses. And I did, of course, the Alley Pond Park, and I did a few in Bronx as well. But that's how I got involved in knowing Ted a little bit as well. Nonetheless, I got involved with that level of being a part of that group that measured the courses. So we had these 16, 12, 20 milers. They were dangerous, but I remember we'd go straight up Sedgwick Avenue, and we would go up past the firehouse. And I think there was an old campus there for NYU at the time, or was it Fordham? I forget. But we would do a loop back around there and come back. It was usually like an out and back with like a hairpin on the backside of the course. A little bit hilly, flat to start out with, and then rolling back on the backside of the course, past the fire station and back to the starting. We'd have to walk from the locker room about maybe 500 yards to get to the starting line.
Did you ever run on the track at Macombs, or what the excuse for a track was there?
It wasn't even there, I don't think.
No,
And
no.
if it was there, I had no cognizant recollection of it.
Yeah, I don't know when it went in, but I know it was for the most part not even worth running on. I was just curious if you had
Never,
nothing at all.
never did it. Never did it. And as a matter, my years at running there were like ended when I went to college in '67, except when I came back for like college breaks and so forth.
Mhm.
And that was probably through 1970 at that time.
Is there anything else that sticks out in your memory about Macombs or the people there before we kind of get
Abs-
into your own running? But I'd like to just kind of, again,
Yeah.
the scene here of what it was like to come show up there on a weekend and just, all the hustle and bustle and chit chat and Ben Gay, and I want to hear it all.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for reaching out to me because I went down memory lane in my own brain, and so many fond recollections of all this. I haven't even revisited my own brain, in years, and the people and the places and the memories. So I made mention of Joe Kleineman, and Kenny Aberson was a helper to Joe, giving out the numbers and everything. And I was amazed by these people, especially Kenny, who did this as a volunteer work. Yeah, it fulfilled a certain need, I guess, for them. But I'm thinking like, hey, they're not even running, and they're standing out. They're standing out in the cold, 20 degrees, for 4 hours for the Cherry Tree Marathon. I said, what kind of people are these, so devoted and so supportive to us runners at the time? And there was just a whole bunch of names of people that were so helpful to me. Nat Cyrilnik. Nat would take me up to races in Connecticut during that time. There were some races up in Greenwich, I believe, 25-kilometer, I recall in particular. And I remember my parents taking me to his house in Queens, and then we would drive up there. He wouldn't take a dime for gas or anything. Of
Did
course,
you ever run with Ann, or like, were you aware of Ann's running as well?
just briefly,
Yeah.
but mostly through Nat.
Okay.
I also, of course, Fred Lebo was a little bit after my time, but of course he was a giant. Jim McDonough. I remember, I have a story for you about Jim McDonough if we have time here.
Go for
So
it.
we were doing a 20 miler, and I dropped out after 16 because I was getting frostbite or something. And Jimmy McDonough got to they were 4 mile loops. They configured this 4 mile loop, and he came back after 16, and they didn't have Gatorade quite then yet, but Jimmy McDonough says, I'm thirsty. He was a little Irish guy, about 5 feet tall. I'm thirsty. He was leading the race. And so one of the guys gave him a shot of bourbon.
Mm.
And when he finished, he says, if it wasn't for the bourbon, I wouldn't have finished.
Yeah, that'll do it, especially on a cold day.
Right? So that was a cute story. Gary Murky. Gary lived on Long Island with me, and he was about 8 years my senior. But during the summers, Glenn would come over occasionally. I had another couple friends, and Gary would drive over, and we would go out after dinner, mind you, and go out running 16 or 20 miles into the dark in the summertime. And I remember in those days, we didn't even have running attire, even though we owned it, because we ran through the neighborhoods. I think we just wore shorts and regular, cut off shorts and t-shirts. Let's see who else. Um,
Were you
North,
surprised? Were you
huh?
surprised when he won the first New York City Marathon? Were you
Oh,
that
well,
guy, or was it, where how do how was that for you?
I wasn't surprised. I mean, I knew he had it in him, but I was so pleased for him. And I
Yeah,
think, maybe he was more surprised than I was. I
yeah, could
don't
be, yeah.
know. Aldo Scandora. I mean, that guy, he was, early president of the Roadrunners Club there, and I know highly involved and integrated in the AAU. He was really the guy who had the vision, I think, that how are we going to pull this thing together, this Roadrunners Club, and integrate it into the larger running community. And I think through his efforts largely of integrating the team, a Roadrunners Club rather, into the larger AAU led to its eventual success of having age group track and recognition throughout the country. Um, Kurt Steiner, darling of a guy.
Everyone has a Kurt Steiner story, multiple.
Oh, he was just a darling of a guy. I mean, the guy was all heart, all heart. I mean, he ran for the love of it. He loved the people who participated in it. He had a great sense of humor, and I always remember him being thirsty in a race, coming around or on a course. There was a couple of courses. At times I volunteered for a course to help out on several races, and he was always be yelling for water, water, water. So he was a character. Everybody loved him.
What was the setup like? So were these looped courses that had just one table and every time you came around you'd get water? Like how
Yeah.
sophisticated was that setup for hydration? And I assume there wasn't, nutrition wasn't really a thing. Even hydration was
Oh,
hardly a thing, but I'm glad to hear that you had water, but I'm just wondering how that was.
water, except for the rare occurrences for Jim McDonough,
Yeah.
bourbon. Orange slices, they had.
Mm.
They had that. Now, for the marathon, Cherry Tree Marathon, which was a loop course, but it was a long loop. I think it was 8.7 miles on the loops or something. They had a table set out in the middle of the course, and they had a couple of volunteers working the tables. And those of us who either hurt or didn't want to run or something would work the tables. And they had a couple of the kids of the parents involved as well. And the wives, some of the wives who didn't run, who wanted to work and help out. And actually maybe check to see where their husbands really were on a Sunday
Right,
morning.
yeah.
But yes, so we had the tables and the water. Other than that, nothing. That was the nutrition and so forth. Hydration even wasn't that big of a deal. If you were thirsty, you drank. That was it,
Yeah.
But not much more than that, Sarah. Not much more than that. I should just mention another name or two. Ed Winrow. I remember how he used to start way back in the races, way back, and he would start like where I was when I was 16, near the back of the pack. And he would work his way all the way up and end up winning like a 4 miler, 8 miler, or six, whatever. He would win a lot of these races because he would run maybe the first mile in about 8 minutes, and he come brazing in under 5 minute mile.
Wow.
So he was able to do that. My Glenn, my friend mentioned earlier, my friend Glenn McCarthy. I don't think he runs anymore. He had some injuries and so forth, but he ran at Jamaica High School, and then eventually at Central Connecticut Community College, and then went out to be a runner for Fresno State out in California. And last but not least, of course, was Ted Corbett. And Ted Corbett, I mean, having the fact that he participated in the Olympics to me was like I'd ever met an Olympian. It totally like astounded me. I remember him being my mother's age, and he had 30 years older than I was at that time, and he had like ripped muscles, just chiseled out. And he said he got those through his running and his work as a physical therapist. During those times we talk about our workouts, somebody asked him, well, what did you do like last Sunday or something when we didn't have a race or something? He says, yeah, I ran 2 times around Manhattan Island by workout. Well, that's almost 50 miles, I guess. And so he was an astounding kind of person. Fortunately, also through the Roadrunners Club, I got to make connections with people in other places of the country. Minneapolis, I got involved in knowing some of the California people, the Washington, D.C. people. My parents eventually moved to Washington, D.C., so people like Gabe Merkin, I had already had some small connection with him, and others there. So it was a totally enriching experience. As an adolescent, Sarah, it kept me out of trouble. I believe a lot of my kids were. I mean, there wasn't much drugs then in those days that I knew of, but there was, there was cigarettes and there was beer and all that.
Well, this
And
is New York in the 60s, New York was not necessarily a great spot to be, never mind up in the Bronx. And yeah,
right,
and you're coming out from Long Island
from
too.
Long
So
Island,
you're totally overwhelmed, like you mentioned earlier.
exactly. I was totally overwhelmed, and being out on the island, even there, the kids were gravitating towards a lot of stuff. The kids on the track team as well,
Hmm.
and I'm glad I had this whole experience and these people as my mentors to look to see how to have a healthier and happier lifestyle.
Is it possible Glenn kind of got into this too, but just how supportive these guys were? Like here are you and Glenn, these little teenagers showing up and they like asked you questions about your training, like they gave you tips. And like you said, you would, look and see what they were wearing, like how instrumental, and like you said, Ted Corbett was there. He was an Olympian. Like this must have just been, you were a boy among giants. And then,
Yeah, right.
you were able to like take in all that knowledge in your own running and in your own life and then bring it forward. Just what was that? Can you possibly, like define what that meant to you and what it means to you now?
I'll try. I mean, I made mention of the fact these people were my mentors. They showed me, in addition to my own father, what it meant to be a man. Um, I saw, and it almost bring me to tears actually, is what a role model can be, and what someone who cares for others looks like.
Mm.
Um, and it looks like others, what it means is shows an interest in, and it was like a real interest, not just a fly by night type thing. And listening to what our training was, if we had problems or injuries, I remember about 5 or 6 months before doing Boston in my senior year of high school, I had a slight Achilles problem. And, there was no internet. I didn't know what to do for it. And so, it was those guys, no one in particular, and Doc Sheehan that was helpful, especially to me, he was, as to what to do, pack it in ice. I told my mother, pack it in ice. They didn't pack it in ice in those days. They put it in hot water, right? With Epsom salt. No, he said, you pack it in ice and you do these mild stretches and everything. So you learned how to take care of things, how to take care of yourself, what to do to rest, how they manage their own conflict. I mean, when I was in high school, what did competition look like? How did you treat competitors? And in those days, in high school at least, competitors were like foes. And then I saw through the Roadrunners Club, yeah, when you start a race, you race. But when you're done with the race and before the race and everything, you're buddies. And I learned a lot about life and how to handle stress and so forth through that experience.
And like you said, these guys, like Kurt Steiner and Kenny Abramson, sitting in that 20 degrees, they're not getting paid. They're doing this out of the love of the sport, and what they did to move the sport forward from an organizational perspective is remarkable. And that was
Indeed,
again just out of the goodness of their hearts and how much they love the sport and everyone who was doing it.
absolutely, absolutely. So, it showed me too that what does dedication look like?
Mhm.
And what self-service can look like as well.
So I just want to drop a few more names here for your memories, and then we can
Yes.
kind of get into your own running. But John Garlip,
Yes.
you had written or said
Oh,
to
yes.
Gary Corbett, I forget. Wow, I think you had written something after he passed away, but you had mentioned a train ride home after a race, and that
Yes.
he was very positive. And can you just talk a little bit about that train ride in particular, and then more specifically, just what John Garlip meant to you as a person and a runner?
Yes, certainly. I'm sorry I didn't mention it earlier, but he, was an outstanding guy. And I remember him like just being a buffed up guy who powered through his races. Really a tough fellow. And at first, I only knew him as a tough fellow because I didn't have any kind of connection with him. And then on a subway ride on my way back home, um, I was sitting next to him, and of course he was like a giant to me. And here I am, 16, scrawny little kid, and I'm reading distance running news.
As one
Uh,
does, yeah.
you familiar with that
Yeah.
publication?
I mean, yeah, I know the name. I'm not, I don't have copies, but I know of it. Yep.
So what it was written by the running community, and it was kind of printed. It actually looked really, really. It had good articles, but it was like printed on at first, like on mimeograph paper, that blue stuff, you know.
Mhm.
Then they finally went into print format. But I remember reading it on the train. I was sitting next to John on the subway, and he says to me, "Oh," uh, and he knew my name. I don't know how he knew. Maybe I guess everybody knew everybody, but he says, "What are you reading there, Dave?" Well, first of all, I was like, how does he know me? You know? And so I told him I was reading this thing about, I even forget what the article was about, Sarah, but he expressed an interest in what I was reading. He asked me what I thought of it. And he said, well, you know, what they're saying this here, you say, what do you think of it? Does that make sense to you? And I said, yeah. He says, why? Why do you think that? Why is it true for you? And it was like, wow, this guy acknowledged me, really listened to what I said, the human connection, you know? And that harkens back to what I was mentioning earlier about how people paid attention to each other. You know, in this day and age, even though I love the running boom and the participation of you go to a race and there's 3,000 people there at a little fun run, as much as I love that, I miss this kind of special one-on-one family experience.
Mhm. Yeah, and you were in the right place at the right time to have, gotten that to the extent that you did, because not many people can have an experience like you did, especially in
Right?
formative years like that. Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Um, Gary Corbett was also wondering about, do you have any memories about running against Barry Geisler's children? Because Geisler and Kurt Steiner helped formalize kind of like youth age group running, and Gary thought that Barry's sons were like not even teenagers when they started running in the 60s. Do you have any memory of that?
I do. Actually, I'm a little reticent to talk about it because I had controversial feelings about it.
Okay,
Um, my major in college was child development,
gotcha.
family studies. And it was a double-edged sword for me, Sarah. On one level, I like that Barry Sr. got his kids involved. I think that they really enjoyed it, but I don't know to what extent they enjoyed it over time, particularly the little ones. I think there were 3 kids at that time that ran. But that jury is still out for me because I don't know. It's like soccer today for kids. The kids that get into sports and so forth. There's one level of it, and I think it really depends on the parental response of how to involve children in a fun way in activity. And so I certainly think it can be competitive. I certainly believe that. But I don't feel like it becomes super competitive, that it becomes like a focus for the family. Is it a healthy thing? I've worked with children and families all my life, and I've seen both sides, and I have seen a lot of growth from kids who have looked back on those period of time and say this is the best thing that ever happened to them. And I looked at others and said, I wish it wasn't that much. So I have, like I said, I have dual feelings about it.
Yeah, and just like, specializing and forcing kids into intense workouts at a young age, it just, like you said, it can go either way. So yeah, I can see how that would be.
I during that time, because of my feelings, I didn't enter into the conversation with much.
Mhm.
Even though I was a teenager myself, I don't know. I always had a penchant for kids and volunteered with them at camps and things like that. So I always had a sensitivity towards that.
Gotcha. I appreciate you sharing that, even if you're reticent to get into it, but thank you.
Yeah,
Um, so we've touched upon kind of your days up in Macombs. Should we get to the 1966 Cherry Tree Marathon?
sure can.
All right. So that was your first marathon. You were 17 at the time, and this would have been just a couple months before Boston that April, right?
Yeah.
Okay, 1966. All right, so go for it.
I had no plans to run Boston. I had a Cherry Tree Marathon came up. So again, I was 66, 67. I was building my mileage. I did the 20 miler. I did okay. In my own workouts, I was running, like I said, I didn't run cross country in my senior year, but my junior year, I did a lot of long distance stuff on the weekends myself. And, I was comfortably working out with 20-mile runs at 8 minutes a mile, that kind of thing. So I could figure I could maybe break 4 at Cherry Tree. But I remember in particular my parents were asking me, and my parents encouraged me to run, but they didn't like these long distances. And so I lied to them, Sarah.
Mm.
They said, "How long's the race today in New York?" And I said, "It's a 5 miler." And I went with my tail between my legs, got the train, went into New York the day before um, to Glenn's. We went in, and I don't know if Glenn ran it, but I think he was helped out or something. Nonetheless, um, I it was like 37 degrees and raining.
And this is
And
what, February, this is President's Day weekend, right?
February, yeah.
Mid-February, yeah, yeah.
37 and raining. And here's what I was wearing. We didn't have good tights or anything like that, so I had
Sure, yeah.
long underwear
Hmm.
underneath my running shorts, my plastic running shorts, a white turtleneck sweater, t-shirt, not even a t-shirt, like a turtleneck, and a singlet over it with a cap. I did have a cap and gloves, and that was it. And so I figured, okay, I'll warm up. So just the opposite happened. I got colder and colder and colder. And I remember making it to about 16.5 miles. And the next thing I knew, I woke up in a hospital. I said, I didn't know where I was. And standing over me was my father.
After
Who
your
was,
5 miler, yeah.
yeah, the race officials told him that it was a marathon. All right. So he was both like proud and because my dad was a sports writer at one point in his life.
Oh,
He was
cool.
he was both proud and he was angry, right? Because I lied. Um, and I said, "What happened?" They said, "We found you." The fireman, remember I told you it was the firehouse down there. The fireman found you on the street in a puddle. I
Wow.
was. They found you laid out in the rain and in the soaking wet in the puddle. So they took me, ambulance, to Morrisania Hospital. Um, don't know if it's in existence anymore, but it was this kind of like welfare hospital at that point in time in Bronx. And I remember people in the emergency room and they were screaming, and people were in the hallway. I was in the hallway. Uh, I've lost all kinds of sensation in my fingers, the last few digits. I think, oh God, I hope I don't have frostbite. Um, and so my dad took me home and gave me a severe talking to. And when the time I got home, my mom said to me, "You're never running again."
Yeah. Seems like the right response, right?
Yeah. Well, a month later, I was back at the
I'm sure, yeah.
of the course. So yeah, that was my experience with my first marathon, the Cherry Tree Marathon.
Do you know how many people ended up starting and or finishing that race? I know
Not many.
Jerry had said that even Ted was, he made it through, but I think he ran like 3:08 or something, which for him was, that's like walking
Yeah.
basically.
Um, by the way, did Glenn run it? Did he make any mention
I
of
don't,
it?
I don't think I don't remember him mentioning it. No, but
Yeah.
yeah, I don't think he did. I think
I
yeah, because
forgot.
I think that would have stuck out in my memory if he had mentioned it. But
So how many? I'm going to venture not less than 60, not more than 80.
okay, so I mean
Something
that's
on that level.
yeah.
Yeah.
For that type of weather, that's still a solid showing.
Yeah.
And then did that, I don't want to say scare some sense into you, but how did you kind of think about marathoning or distance running, or did that kind of change your perspective at all? Like you said, you were back there in a month, so it couldn't have been that drastic of a
Maybe more committed.
change. Yeah,
Because
interesting.
I said to myself, on a good day, I would have made it easy.
Hmm.
It was exposure. The doctor told me it wasn't exhaustion much, it was exposure
Yeah.
that I
Were
had.
they like actively sweeping the course, or was it just some firefighters that just happened to?
Oh, it was mid course. I guess I was at that point in the course, I must have been what, 2 hours and 45 minutes, something like into it. So it was still going on. The race was still going on. But
Okay.
remember, with 60 people, 80 people, there were large gaps
Yeah,
between.
so someone might have just, seen you after however long you had been lying there, basically, and went
Yeah,
to the fire station and were
a
like, "Hey, go
fireman,
pick this
yeah.
guy up." Yeah.
And back in those days, 4 hours, although I was very happy with that, to do that, it was near the back of the pack.
Hmm.
Um, I was talking to my sister-in-law about this the other day. That back in those days, there was that run around Yankee Stadium, and I remember ran like 6:10 a mile pace, and I was next to last.
Wow. Yeah. That's
I mean, I mean, today, that would have been at least a mid-packer.
yeah. Yeah. So then you ended up doing Boston that year?
Not that year.
Not that
That
year.
was
Okay.
66.
Okay.
That was 66. So I was still on the track team. So I did take about 2 weeks off. I was exhausted. Um, Came back and ran the track, and then got back into the summer road racing. That year there was the milk run. I ran the milk run in Central Park, as I mentioned earlier.
Mhm.
It was 25K, and I think I ran, I don't know, pretty good. I think 145 or something like that. For me, it was good. And then, like I said, I quit cross country on my team to train specifically for what was going to be the Boston Marathon.
Mhm.
I did the road runs again, same way, senior year, and did the cross country series. The whole cross country series. I remember, I think Joe Burns won the 9 miler. That was the last of the series.
Up
Uh,
in Van Cortlandt?
Van Cortlandt Park,
Yeah.
yeah. I remember how did I see him do it? But I saw him because I was on the field or something when I was going around. But I saw him like go up that cemetery hill like a goat, and impressed by that. But nonetheless, so then winter came, did all those races and so forth, and that's the point in time where I had a slight Achilles injury. I was talking to both Ted about that and Dr. Sheehan. They got me pretty much self-rehabbed with their support. And then my dad took me to Boston for the Boston Marathon. Again, I must have something to have to do with rain for marathons. Wouldn't you know it? It rained that day too, and it was cold. This was April 19th, 1967. They always did it on the Monday. They always did it on Patriots Day in those days. And I ended up walking a lot of the last 4 or 5 miles coming downhill. I think, oh, I'll be good. I'll be running like that. But my quadriceps were so beat up
Mhm.
that I had to basically walk downhill. I ended up in 3:41. Not bad for a high school kid. First completed marathon. And that set me off with that adventure.
Yeah. So I'm sure similar to your first attempted marathon, that probably, made you more motivated to get out there and do it again and do it better.
Right, exactly. And then since that time, Sarah, I've done 31 running marathons, and I've done 162 race walking in marathons,
Wow.
some of which are judged, but most of them are not. And I've done 4 100 milers, uh, 300Ks, two 24-hour races, a couple of, well, let's see, about 8 50Ks. So, I didn't know when to stop, I guess.
When when was your when would you say was your marathoning heyday, as it were? Like what was your marathon PR and when did you run that?
Running or walking?
We'll start with running.
Running, the early 70s, mid 70s.
And where were you living at the time?
College, Delaware, and then I was living with my parents for a period of time in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
So my PR running was Philadelphia, 1971, 251.07.
Excellent. Nice.
So I just to make sure it wasn't a fluke, I did Boston in 72 and 252.15.
Oh, awesome. Wow.
Yeah. And my race walk back in the day, 1987, I walked Marine Corps Marathon in 4:27.
That might be even more impressive.
I didn't.
Wow.
But by the time I got done race walking, which was marathons 207 in 2007, I'd be like a 5 hour and 45 minute guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Now I'm kind of beat up. Knee, I told you about my knee. I just had total knee replacement. Hips been banged up pretty good. I remember I had an exchange with emails with Glenn McCarthy and how we've beat ourselves up over the years. My mother warned me. She says, David, she says, you're gonna run yourself into the ground. And so not to discourage anybody, but take care of your body. Make sure you do the stretching. We didn't know anything about stretching back in 1968. Stay with that. Take care of your nutrition. Stay with your flexibility exercises. Cross train if you can or if you like it, and your body will be okay.
yeah. And when you were at Delaware, were you running there?
Yes,
Were you running on the team, or obviously you were, also doing, I imagine, your own stuff on the side, but yeah,
on the team.
how did that work go for you?
On the team.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
probably the slowest guy there.
You were
Uh,
there.
um, but I lowered my 2 mile time to 10:12. Um, again, one of the slowest guys on the team, and I ran cross country.
Mhm.
I ran it in my first year, freshman year, and my sophomore and junior year, and then my senior year. Again, I was going to Philadelphia all the time for the road races. That's when I did my 2:51:07, and there was a guy named Bob Gilchrist. He was with the Delaware Track and Field Club, and I got involved with that whole scene. There was a nice race down there in particular I should mention. If anybody ever wants to go down to it, I'd recommend it. It's in Wilmington. I think it's in April. It's called the Caesar Rodney Half Marathon.
Mhm.
It's a half marathon through most beautiful farmlands and suburban areas in and around Wilmington, Delaware. It's a good one. And I think it's produced some pretty good times as well. I
And
think I,
were you ever running for Long Island Striders?
oh yes, that's what my first club team.
Okay,
Now,
when was that?
Mike Burns,
Okay, yep.
I don't know if you're familiar with that name, but he was the coach and he formulated the Long Island Striders.
Okay.
Um, I mean, he other than high school track, he was the guy who really put the energy out on his own to formulate the Long Island Striders, which eventually became the Long Island Athletic Club. Our colors were red and white, much like the Striders in Southern California.
Mhm.
Our logo, it had the winged,
The
kind of
wing, yep.
look like Striders.
Hmm.
Red jerseys with white shorts and so forth. So yeah, that was my first club. Then I was with Long Island Athletic Club just for a short period of time. But my club that I really spent most of my road running with was Milrose, through Milrose. And that why, again, I mentioned the fact of there was a guy named Ben Malkasian, between Ben and Bill Coyne, who were on Milrose. They kind of got me involved in the Milrose team. I was runner-up back in 19, I should mention this, this is frustrating, I think I repressed it. 1973, they had a race called Twin Bridges. Twin Bridges? 72? Yeah, Twin Bridges. It ran from the Washington Monument to Mount Vernon and back, 36-mile race. And that team was to go to Scotland to do the Twin Bridges race. And we had like 8 guys who did it. I was in school at the time, but I came back for the race. And the first 3 guys would go to Scotland. And I remember that I did the 36 miler and my time was 5:04. I remember my time, but I came in 5th for the team. I think if I had just run like 20 minutes faster,
Yeah.
I didn't have it in me. But that was my longest run at that point in time.
And
36.
was that something that appealed to you? Like once you did that, was that obviously you got into ultras later on, but did that appeal to you,
Yeah,
obviously? But how were you doing ultras at the same rate that you were doing marathons? Like were you mostly doing marathons and then you kind of moved up to ultras, or were you kind of?
mostly marathons, mostly because of where I went to school and stuff was the availability.
Mhm.
I didn't start running ultras until really getting into it, and it was through race walking primarily, till 1995. Yeah,
Got it.
and those were in California where I live now.
I see. And when you were in New York, did you ever cross paths with Nina Cusick or Paul Fetcher? They both passed away earlier this month. I was wondering if you had any
Yeah,
memories with either of
saw
them.
that. Yeah, knew Nina primarily through Gary and Jane. Um, yeah, I was sad to see that. I wasn't like a buddy with her, or a friend like I was with Gary, but more like when Gary had invited me to some picnics and stuff like that, and I would see her there. And due to that, she would recognize me and meet her at the races.
And then Paul Fetcher, did you cross paths with him at all?
Not much, no.
Were there any other women that you remember competing against, either in New York or when you kind of moved down to the Mid-Atlantic or when you were out in California? But you were kind of in the heyday as women started racing marathons, particularly like California in the early 70s. But were you competing against or running with any women?
I knew some people on the track side. Francie Goodridge, who was Francie Crocker. She was 800 meter, 1500 meter runner. I knew her through some mutual running friends through Michigan. And she and her husband were friends of mine for a while. I've lost contact with them. I know they're back in Michigan. And then also too, a woman named Terry Hull. She was out of Knoxville, Tennessee. She was an 800 meter runner. Geez, some of the I know these are all ultra people, but Helen Klein, she was a 50 miler. There's a big race in Sacramento named after her. She must be around 92, 95 if she's even living now.
Mm.
But she held the age group record, 82 or 83-year-old for the marathon at one point. But most of the ones I knew were probably not big names in the field.
Got it. So post-collegiately, you're running marathons. I assume you were working full-time or, you had some employment.
Yeah.
Just wondering what you were doing for work and how your training fit in. Like, were you still doing the type of interval work that you had done earlier on? Did you have a coach? Did you have a team? Just what was your running like once you were in the real world, as it were?
Okay. So training wise, once I got out of high school, and we're doing all those intervals and stuff like that. There was a guy named Bob Dynas. Do you know that name? He was sixth at the 1973 Boston Marathon. That was the same year that Amby Barefoot won it. Kenny Moore ran in that one.
Yeah, I'll have to look that up.
Yeah, but Bob Dynas, Deines. He held at one time the American record for 50 miles. Bob Dynas. He ran for Occidental College right here in LA. I became friends with him through another guy named Rick Spavins. And Rick Spavins was a Millrose runner who lived in Patchogue in Long Island. And we got familiarized with each other because he was on Millrose team. And so we traded some training ideas, even though he was here on the West Coast. I was living in Delaware at the time. And Bob and Rick and Francie LaRue, that runner lady, her brother was on the Oxy team too. They would do this long, slow distance stuff, and they would do like every day, like clockwork, 15 miles, 15 miles, 15 miles, 15 miles, 15 miles, and then on Sundays they would do 20, and they would do it slow. I mean, now this guy, Bob Dynas, was like 2:21 marathoner back then. He would do 8-minute miles. And so he would say he would do it because he says it was the longevity. He would race every weekend. And so he said that the races were his speed work. Kind of avant-garde, but nonetheless, that's the style he used. So I hated doing intervals, but I did them out of necessity, or I thought so out of necessity at the time. There was no real tempo running. I guess there was maybe fartlek type stuff you could do. I did that, but I got into this long, slow stuff. I said, I'll try that. And that's when my marathon time dropped under 3 hours. That's the type of training I did for a long time. And I did that all the way until I went to college. So I guess 3 or 4 years. And then from there, at college, I had to run the track cross country stuff. But other than that type stuff, I would just go out on long runs by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I stayed with that until, I don't know, now, I guess, with my race walking, I kind of blend it a little bit more with like long intervals, like long, I guess, like 2 to 4K intervals like that. And otherwise it's long, slow stuff. I can't do real fast stuff anymore, but that's how I would train.
So when you were doing this, when you were running, like in your 20s, were you like up in the morning training, going to work, coming home, running again? Like what was a day in the life like?
2 days in college for sure. When I was like in my early 20s, it was more of a 1 day a thing. And then my mid 20s, that is when I started doing the long, slower stuff again. And I would just do 1 a days as well. I never did too much twice a days. when I experimented with it, I found that maybe I didn't spare with it long enough. I would get hurt. I would get tendonitis and
Mhm.
stuff like
Yeah,
that. But that's when or late 80s, that's when I got more interested in doing like yoga, stretching. Now I do a little bit of Pilates, yoga, stretching, not enough, mind you.
yeah,
But
you can never do enough.
but you know, back in the day, like in 1965, what did we do? We touched our toes twice and called it a day.
Sure, yeah,
That was stretching.
yeah. And were you doing, so you said you ran 31 marathons. Was that over a period of, like, how many
Uh,
years were you doing marathon, several a year? Was it over a prolonged amount of time?
those 1967 at Boston one to 1983, and that would have been Toronto.
So you packed them in, at least two a year.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
Toronto.
yeah. Did you have a favorite race, whether because of the course or your experience or your time? Are there any that stick out to you in particular?
Well, in the running years or the race walking years?
We'll stick with running for now, then we'll get to race walking.
Okay. Running, Boston is so special with the history, and it was my first one and the hoopla about it. But as a course, I like Philadelphia. I like Philadelphia because um, you run along Kelly Drive, and it's a beautiful wide bicycle path. The winds, curves, and it's kind of out and back. But every time you come around the art museum, there you go. It's Rocky. You can see Rocky
Yeah,
running.
yeah.
But it was a three loop. And I don't know if it's still a three loop type of course. And it was always just shaded and smooth, nice asphalt type course. I like that one. Now, race walking, other than walking trails, okay, and I did a lot of trail stuff. Road courses, I've done London, I've done Stockholm. I love Stockholm. And I've done Bermuda, and I've done about 8 or 10 of them in Canada. On the roads, though, challenging, Big Sur. Not only because of the hills, but from mile about 19 to about mile 23, the road is like, instead of being flat, even though it's up and down, it's kind of like this.
Yeah, the camber, yeah.
Yeah. So you have one leg going like this,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're going up. So that is a rough course. That's a rough
And
course.
it's so exposed too. If you get any semblance of wind, you're gonna feel
Oh
it.
yeah, exactly.
Did you find that was the race walking like a competitive outlet for you? Like, was it for fitness or some combination thereof? Like once you
Almost
stopped
a matter
running,
of
basically, yeah.
almost a matter of necessity
Mhm.
because I was having hip flexor problems. When I was a baby, my mom fell on me, and I ended up having bursitis in my hip.
Oh,
It healed okay structurally, but it got bursitis chronically, which led to a whole number of other problems in knees. And then I wore orthotics to kind of accommodate that, which was a godsend in a way. So I would just find out if I tried to run, I get tight, I get hurt. So I figured I had a friend named Danny O'Connor. He was in the 1972 Olympic Games. And what was Steve's name? Steve Hayden was in the Olympic Games too. Both race walkers from my high school, incidentally. And Dan, at one time, I went to help out at a race in 1978 in Washington, D.C., where I was living at the time. And I told him about my plights with running and so forth. And he said, they have a good club here in the D.C. area. Would you consider doing race walking? I said, I don't know nothing about it. I don't know if I'd like it, whatever. So I did. I tried it, and I went and moved to Michigan in 1980, and a gentleman by the name of Frank Alongi, he was a national or international race walking judge from Italy originally, and he had coached a lot of this Italian race walkers. And I came under his tutelage for a couple of years while I was in Michigan. And he taught me the right format, judged me. I got a good sense of what it entailed. And like I said, most of the time, most of these races were unjudged. So I could very well be skipping my way through these things, but I think I monitor myself pretty well. Um, so yeah, I would say I was pretty decent in the mid 80s, but then I progressively got slower and slower. But I found it was a way I could still get exercise, get a good aerobic effect. And when I was racing, I would say the racing is like every bit as hard or as harder than a run because you're turning over your feet about 150 to 180 strides a minute, and you're breathing hard, and it requires considerable flexibility to get it done right.
And
So yeah,
just focusing on the technique, like you said,
yeah,
running, you can kind of just kind of lope with one foot in front of the other, but with race walking, you have to have something on the ground. So you have to just be focused on where your feet are landing. And I can't imagine doing that on trails. That must be, in
yeah.
some ways even more difficult than running on trails because you can only step so far.
Well, yeah, and of course, trails would be like, part of the time is illegal because you're running up roots and things like
Right.
that.
You can't like land
Yeah,
on roots all the time. Yeah. Hmm.
right. But I've done, like I said, I did a 24-hour on a track once.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear about that. So in the 95, you did 50 miles on the American River or the American River 50 mile in
Yeah,
Sacramento to Auburn. And then in
yes.
96, you did the 24 hours on the track. So you were really going into the ultra walking
Oh,
scene
good
at
stuff.
that point. Yeah.
Yeah, they were. Once I got to California, I started doing more of that. The 50 miler was an interesting course. It's called the American River 50 miler. Still exists. The first half of it is on a bike path. You start at Sacramento State College, and you go all the way to, I forget the name of the turnoff, but it's all on macadam. It's the first 25 miles, and then you transition into the Western States Trail, and that's where they run the Western States 100 miler.
Yep.
And from there you go all the way to Auburn, and it's up and down routes, some flat sections, but some rough trail running too. And the last mile and a half of that course is straight uphill,
Wow.
and to the course
Yeah.
ending. And I was able to, my best time actually, I did 11:38 for that course, race walking. So I was really happy with that 50 miler.
Were you
Um,
intrigued by the Western States aspect of it? Like what made you choose that one in particular? Or just
well,
you
it
were
happens
in
to be very,
California and that was
it
nearby?
happens, it happens to be very popular
Okay.
on the West Coast. And I also participated in the camps, not the 100 miler at Western States because I didn't qualify, but participated in the camps
I see.
uh, for Western States for 2 or 3 years.
Cool.
And I paced Matt Mahoney. He's a guy out of Florida for about 20 miles in the middle of the Western States one year.
Are you ever gonna do Western States yourself? Or are you happy to pace
Oh
it?
no,
I
no, no! I'd be very
guess it's
happy
so hard to get in.
after my knee surgery. I'm just really happy to get back there and do
Yeah,
the five
baby steps, as it were.
baby steps, literally.
And then
I
in
walked
96, in
like I
96, oh, go ahead.
I walked a mile and a quarter yesterday. I
Oh,
was
okay,
delighted.
yeah, so well, we won't give up hope, but yeah, I think maybe Western States might be a little far down the line.
I think so.
In
I did,
96, you did 24 hours on the track.
yeah, that was at Foothill College in Los Altos, California. It happened to hit 103 degrees that day.
Perfect.
Um, it was wonderful, uh, but the night was pretty pleasant. It's one thing about California. As hot as the days get, the nights are pretty pleasant. But it was, yeah, I can't remember the number, but like 400 and something laps around this college track. But I had a weird sensation there, almost like an hallucination. After I was going for about 7 or 8 hours, around and around and around and around and around and around. Although every 6 hours we turned direction. But after going around and around and around for about 6 or 7 hours, I started getting this feeling where I wasn't walking in a circle anymore. I was walking straight.
Wow. Huh.
The bends for me started becoming straight. And
Weird.
I thought
Yeah.
I was walking down a single path.
Huh.
Very strange sensation. But yeah,
So you
but
did
it was well
82
done.
miles.
Huh?
Oh, so you did 82 miles. Did you have a goal going in?
I'd hope to do 80 miles. So
Yeah. All
yes.
right. Nice. Nice.
And I slept, but I only slept 20 minutes through the whole 24-hour period.
Yeah. Sounds about right for a race like that.
Right?
Power nap.
Yeah. So that was an achievement for me. I had done a couple 100 miles. I did the Vermont 100 miler, and I did it in 30. It's mostly trails through farmlands and stuff. I
Mhm.
did that in 30 hours and 10 minutes, and then I did one in Texas. Rocky Raccoon is called 100 miler back in 97 or 8, 98. I did that in 27 hours and 40 minutes, and those were race walking. So
Is there a race walking community, as it were, like there's a running community?
no, not the same. I mean, there is one downtown LA. It's called they actually have two clubs. It's called the Leggers, the LA Leggers,
Yep.
and the LARR Road Runners. It's not Road Runners like the club Road Runners. It's just called Road Runners. Or race runners, road racers, LARR. I'm not really familiar with them, but the Leggers are the big group.
Got it.
And Leggers is comprised of runners too, but they have a real strong walking component. I train alone anymore, mostly out of convenience, I guess you could say. There's a couple people. I usually work out at a lake near here. There's a pathway around a lake. It's not very far. It's like 800 meters around, but it's really scenic, and I like to look at the birds and the swans and stuff. See, that's what happens when you turn to get old. You start looking at swans and birds. But
I actually saw a swan on my run today, so
I usually follow
enjoy it too.
I usually find somebody who's at least a fast walker or slow jogger to keep me company.
I wanted to just, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I wanted to go back to the course measurement part of your
Yeah.
life, especially as a youngster, as it were. You asked for that surveyor's wheel in 8th grade. Do you know why you were interested in that? Like, it's just such an odd proclivity for someone that age, or even any, people just show up to a race course and assume that it's measured well. But what made you interested in like the nuts and bolts of course measurement?
Okay, so a couple of vectors led me there. Okay, so one was I told you earlier I was always interested in working with children and families and stuff like that, and even at a young age. So when I was like in, I don't know, 7th grade, my brother said, "Hey, Dave," and my brother was like, how old was he then? 6 years my junior, so I guess he was in early elementary school. He said, "Dave, why don't you? We have a bunch of kids in the neighborhood that were his age." He said, "Why don't you form a track club for us?" Because he knew I was on a track club, so he wanted to be like Big Brother, right?
Totally.
So I asked the parents first. I was smart enough to get parental permission. That much I knew that, but they said, "Yeah, that's fine." So I developed this little club for about 7 or 8 kids, a couple girls and so forth. And we had the block that I lived on was exactly, well, I didn't know how long it was, but I thought it would be like a quarter mile around. It was almost like a circle, except for one of the turns. This is in Long Island now. And the front of my house was a long straightaway. And so I had the kids running up and down, but I was saying, I'd like to know exactly how far they're running. I didn't have a tape or anything. So I saw in some kind of magazine about track and field. It might have been Track and Field News. The wheel. And my God, 1962 or something, that wheel cost $49.95. Well, I don't know what that would be today, but
Hundreds of dollars, yeah.
yeah, right?
Yeah.
So my parents asked me what did I want for my birthday. I said, "Why don't you put Christmas and birthday together for me and buy me this wheel?" Are you out of your mind? What are you going to do with this
Yeah,
thing?
geez.
So I said, "Well, I want to do this." And they thought it was a nice idea. So my dad got it for me. So, we put the wheel together and it had a little counter thing on it. And it measured in feet. And it had a little wheel calibration on the inside of it that could tell you, like, one revolution was 3 feet, but it had little things that showed you where it was 1 foot or one part of a foot. So I measured a 30-yard sprint for the kids, a 50-yard, 100-yard, 220-yard, and I measured this loop around my house. It was 426 yards.
Wow. So yeah, you were right.
Yeah. So I put a little paint mark on the road, and 14 yards beyond, that was the quarter mile. We had a half mile. For myself, I did a mile course. I plotted out these things. So we would have track meets once every 3 weeks in the summertime, in the twilight. So the parents would come out and I would run the track, and then I'd time it. And then I actually produced a little newsletter.
You were like your own Roadrunners Club.
Yeah,
The
right.
neighborhood.
And I would put
The Joe Kleinerman of the Long Island block you lived on, yeah.
So I didn't put the kids' times or places, but I just said who participated
Right,
because I
because you don't
didn't.
want to make it, yeah, like, Joey beat so-and-so and then have it become, yeah.
Because these kids are like, think of it, they're 6, 7 years old, right? So now, so that got it going, and I had one boy whose father said he wants to run 3 miles around the block. So I said, "Are you sure?" I made him sign a little thing. So I plotted out it was 12, almost 13 laps around the place. And he did it. This little kid, he was like 8 years old, and he did 3 miles. I think he did like about 28 minutes or something. I mean, amazing.
Awesome.
So I had them do all these things, did the newsletter, and it kind of fell apart because some of the other parents didn't like it because the two reasons. One is they didn't like these kids racing up in front of their yards because they said for liability reasons, the kid collapsed on their yard. And the other one was some of the mothers felt that it wasn't right for a teenage boy to be running an event for these little kids. So my parents said best to leave it alone.
Huh, that's too bad.
Yeah. They thought the worst, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So
Um,
so I abandoned it. But that's how it got me into the wheel. Now that's the prelude to the measuring course stuff.
yeah,
So
so in 1966, June 12th, we have
right.
the letter that you wrote to Ted Corbett expressing your interest in race course measurement, which I'm sure he was very surprised to receive. And then he wrote you back 2 days later, and then you wrote him back 2 days later. So you must have had a good UPS, or not UPS, USPS to get your letters that quickly. But
Yeah.
just wondering, what prompted you to reach out to him? Did you know him already through your
Through the running, yeah.
rooms? Okay.
Briefly, but I knew he was involved in that. And I actually saw that as well in that distance running news about the course measurements and all that, and knew about him and Ron Dawes. And I think there was Steve Young out of Arizona. He was a race walker. Steve Young. No, Steve Young was not. Who was the one in Arizona? But anyhow, I can't remember. Nonetheless, so he and I exchanged some things. I measured a course, and the one that he had actually done with the steel tape at Alley Pond Park. We did one. I think we did the Henry Isola course in Bronx, and a few others I can't recollect. And I did my own. I also, well, I'll come back to that. So, and he had a steel tape, and I think that he measured out. Wow, this goes back some time. 700 feet or 700 yards on a flat place in Bronx, and I wheeled it, and I knew that we measured the. This is really scientific. He measured it with a steel tape at a certain degree temperature, so it would the elasticity of the steel tape.
Yeah.
So I did it with my wheel, and it was very close. It was like 98.89% or some such thing. So we did a calibration based on that,
Mhm.
and then used the wheel to measure this course, and then did the recalibration to know exactly how the course was. So this became a lot easier, right? I mean, back in the old days, they'd drive a car over it, right? And say, oh, yeah, that's 3/10 of a mile, or that's 5,000 meters. Or no. So, but then the next thing was the clicker was on a bicycle.
Mhm.
Had this little clicker device, like my wheel, but on a bicycle. And that was fine, but you had to make sure that your inflation of the tires was just absolutely precise. So it was more than a couple of pounds off, and that was affected by the weather. But what was nice about the measuring wheel, it was hard rubber. It was just standard. It didn't inflate or decrease with measurement.
Mhm.
And it was very controllable because when you did it, you could only go on a straight line. Bicycle, you have to go around a car or something. This you go straight down.
Mhm.
And we were able to measure a couple courses. And as a matter of fact, I think it was Ted was getting these results from courses around the country, and they did their own calibrations. And he didn't include me that much in reviewing that material, but I remember seeing some of that stuff. And I had a race I put on myself in my senior year of high school, summer, 4th of July, and also my freshman year of college, summer, 4th of July. I had a 4.25 mile race in Wantagh. One of the first races in Nassau County, by the way. It was a 4.25 called Four Freedoms Run. And I measured the whole thing with my wheel. So put that on. Well, it only cost $2 to enter.
What a deal.
No t-shirts, but you got a medal.
Did you develop a different type of relationship with Ted in your course measuring communications versus when you saw him running, or was he just kind of the same Ted?
Pretty much the same Ted. I
Yeah.
mean, never close. But I think I certainly respected him from the get-go, and I think he has some positive regard for me too, being 16-year-old that had that kind of, my dad would call it gumption, to do something. You know, um, I look back now, I'm retired, and I don't have no gumption to do anything like that.
You
But
don't need
back,
it anymore.
yeah, I don't need to do that. But back in the day, I did. Back in the day, I did. And I think it opened up a conversation for him and and I remember him as being kind of a quiet man, reserved. But now that we had this experience together, we were able to talk more with each
Mhm.
other.
And a couple times you've mentioned distance running news. Were you reading other publications
Yeah,
about running, like Distance Running Journal, Track and Field News, the
yeah.
Roadrunner newsletters? What else was kind of in your reading list, as
I
it
was,
were, at the time?
I had a subscription to Track and Field News since 1962. I don't have them anymore. I don't. If I had them, I guess I would have been a millionaire now. I could probably, well, at least $100,000 selling them all off. But I had that long distance log. I had all the long distance logs,
Yep.
Browning Ross,
Hmm.
and I was actually and Glenn was too, a submitter to long distance log. So Glenn and I and another friend of ours, we used to put on these races, just three or four of us on a golf course in Bethpage, New York. And we would send in the results to Browning Ross. And God bless him, he put the results in for the four of
I don't know how he did that. He must have had, can't imagine all the results he was getting, but he got it
us.
done.
But he did it. And I love that magazine because long distance log, God, I'm sure they don't have anything comparable to that today. But they would have everybody in every race throughout the United States, and you'd learn about, oh yeah, this guy in California, he's about what I do for 10K or 20K and so forth. And then you find somebody who knows him, and you start writing to him, and say, hey, how do you train? And we did these things then. Um, I mean, I don't think that exists anymore, maybe at the elite level, but not for the plebeian type where I
Mhm.
would.
Yeah. You mentioned like Browning Ross and of course Ted Corbett having been an Olympian, but did you know like running history as it pertained to either runners from previous eras or older runners who had been, were in your orbit that had been running very competitively, like Ted or Browning, but were you kind of aware of the history of the sport?
Yeah, I mean, as much as was available.
Yeah.
I mean, now there's everything, right, through the internet and everything. But everything I could find out that I go to the library and get books and stuff like that. But there wasn't a lot. I remember one book I really liked too that pointed to that was Fred Wilt. He wrote a book called How They Train. And it talked about guys who were like at the end of their careers, and the end of the careers in the late 50s, early 60s. So these are people who were running in Ted's Olympic years and before. Jim Peters, that whole group. And these ultra runners, that's how I first heard about ultras actually.
Mm.
Um, it was very strong in South Africa at the time, in Britain, these ultra runners. And
Right, London to Brighton and the
London,
like
Brighton,
comrades, yeah.
all those. And I remember that a word that I became familiar with the first time for running shoes in those days was called plimsolls.
Hmm.
Plimsolls you know that term, plimsolls?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They were like sneakers that were just like called like running shoes. And these guys would run these 50-miler in plimsolls, like old Keds or something like
Right,
that.
yeah, flimsy little things, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's how I got familiarized with it. But I remember I told you my dad was a sports writer earlier on.
Mm.
My dad, he didn't know much about marathons per se, but he knew about track and field because he would have to track in Philadelphia where he lived. He would cover Penn relays and so forth.
Sure.
And I think there was a precursor to the Penn relays. I don't know when Penn relays actually started, but there was a precursor to it. And he would tell me he would cover it, and there'd be a mile race, and there'd be a 2-mile race, and there were no women except for a couple sprints and so forth. So he kind of tied me into some of the historical aspect, even though it wasn't road running. It was about track.
Hmm.
And I remember too that I remember very vividly in the New York Times that the day that Peter Snell broke the world's record for the mile. It said 354.1 for the mile in New Zealand on grass. He ran it on grass. So I had that. I cut it out of the New York Times. I had it posted on my wall, and I remember having it there as inspiration.
That's awesome. Yeah, back when things like that would make the front page of the New York Times,
Yeah, right.
in the
Exactly.
sports section. Yeah.
Talking about races, will have to get back online later, but I understand that Faith Kippion tried to do her 4 minute mile today. I'd like to
Yeah,
see.
it might be happening right now, actually. Or I guess
Yeah,
it would have already happened if it did, but yeah, I haven't seen anything
I'll,
about
I'll,
that yet.
I'll
Are
check
you,
that out later.
are you following the sport closely now?
I am. I have a subscription to Flow Track. It's for a lot of the meets on in cross country, visually, of course. And then Citius magazine. I listen to their podcast, a number of other podcasts. Um, I don't have time for all of them actually, even though I am retired, because I have other interests in my life now as well. Um, but I do follow it. I try to go on YouTube and I plug in, track and field 2025 and I see everything I can. Race walking too. I look for, there's not as many competitions, but I look at all their stuff too. Because they're running race walking, it does, they used to do the 20 and 50K. They don't do 50K very often anymore. They cut it out. It's now the 35K. So
And what is
that's,
it for the Olympics now?
yeah, 20 and
20.
35K.
Okay, it is that. Okay.
20 and 35, yeah.
Did you obviously you heard about Grand Slam not finishing its season,
I
but
did.
do you see Grand Slam as kind of the future or the what the sport needs, or do you think it's just kind of a a fluke
Well,
as it seems like
no,
it didn't quite
I,
get what they wanted this year?
I feel sad that it did. I think that any effort that's made to try to advance the sport, I'm happy with. Um, Maybe it didn't think itself through enough. I don't know. Um, I know a lot of the sponsors were just enamored by it. It's following. That was part of it. Um, you know, I, I think some of the athletes too felt that some of the day changes around, the schedules were being moved around. Was it the Pennsylvania one? Was that, no, that was
Yeah,
a
yeah, in Philly,
yeah.
the last one.
Pennsylvania one changed its format, and people weren't happy with that because they wanted to run two of them rather than one of them, and there wasn't enough recovery time. And there were some bad feelings about that as well. Maybe some of the money thing was a little for the competition was off. Then they canceled LA. I really wanted to go to that here, um, but because of that, I think that it started to implode. Now, I think it was a clever idea. Maybe they can reformat it in some way. I don't know how they would do it, but you hate to see anything that has a step forward in a sport that's growing and evolving like ours to have to take a ding like that. I like the Diamond League, but I think they've made it because those races have been around forever. Oslo,
I would
Stockholm.
say a much more rabid fan base in Europe that they've established over the years to keep that afloat.
I mean, you look at Ostrava the other night, and it's a Tuesday night, and the stadium's packed. Well, you look at some of our races, even the Pennsylvania ones. I mean, if you think we'd have to get a good draw from Americans at least, a good, I would say, third of the stadium was completely empty.
Yeah.
So, it's about promotion. Our country needs more promotion. I think maybe some of the Europeans have been more embedded in it. How this affects road running, I'm not sure. I think road running, because of its popularity and popular involvement, it's grown a lot. I love to see that. Here in California, though, what I've seen in Southern California, as opposed to what we had in New York at that time, and I have not opposed this on a certain level, mind you, but it seems like so many things are run fors and run against, like run for dog's good health, or run for run for health and all that, which is great, but it doesn't draw. It's more like a fun run,
Hmm.
So they've replaced a lot of the serious runs with these. Is that a bad thing? No, because you still get a good race, but the emphasis is different. You know what I'm saying? Now they do have a good number of 10Ks and 10 milers and half marathons now, and even a few marathons, but not given the number I think that they once had. Northern California is a little different. Northern California, where I used to live, has a very, very wide bouquet of races. And they have such fantastic trails up there that they have the whole trail series. They have a lot of the run fors and run against. When I say run against leukemia and all that stuff, which I still love, but for different reasons. And they have a really strong track program up there. I think there's a lot more people putting on these races up north. Why that is, I'm not sure. Here, I think in Southern California, LA, where I live, one thing I did hear was it's difficult to get permits because of our traffic and access roads and stuff like that. Whereas in Northern California, there's more segregated, not segregated, that's the wrong word. I guess you could say set alone neighborhoods that are available for these kind of things. So whatever reason it is, it is.
Yeah.
I looked at the New York race calendar. It's pretty good. Now, how's Boston looking?
There's not much action. I mean, the BAA obviously does the marathon. They have the 5K, 10K, but there's not, even my town outside of Boston has, I think, a 5K series that has 4 or 5 races throughout the year, but really it's not like the New York Roadrunners, which put on a race basically every weekend somewhere in the city. It's not nearly that robust.
I know for a couple summers, I used to go up your way when I was in college, and I would do the Beverly 5-miler, and there was a couple others I did up there, Beverly 5-miler, and it was one.
And there's a Falmouth road race. That's a big one, obviously, out on the.
Yeah, I didn't do Falmouth, but I know of. Are you yourself a runner, Sarah?
Yep. Yeah, I've run 6 marathons, not with any great speed, but keeps me going. And I grew up playing basketball, but then after college, I needed something to do to stay active, and running was the easiest thing to get into, and I've been into it ever since.
Very good. So now this series that you're doing and interviewing all these people, where are you going with this?
So we are going to post these to YouTube and eventually, I think, on Gary's website. And then somehow we're going to try and pull them all together into, I don't know what, but just try to kind of create a narrative around these early years of New York Roadrunners. Gary's calling this the Bronx years. So 1958 until the early 70s when things kind of moved to Central Park, but just trying to capture these stories. I mean, like we were discussing earlier, like Nina and Paul, who passed away earlier this month, now's the time to capture these stories. I mean, 20 years ago would have been the time to capture these stories, but just trying to get these documented now. And Gary's been doing such a good job of preserving his father's legacy and also just kind of keeping the spirit of the early years of New York Roadrunners alive. So
what a contribution. And your contribution as well. How fortunate we are to have that footage of what you sent me with the early days. How wonderful that is. Because 100 years from now, when the sport grows and develops and so forth, to have this as maybe one day we have a Roadrunners, place like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame where all these collectibles are there. It would be a travesty not to have that kind of material now that you're developing it.
Yeah, and there just historically has not been really an interest in that type of preservation, and also the sport I think now is so focused on, it's very forward looking. What's next in technology, what's next in nutrition, who's gonna be the first woman to break 4 minutes in the mile,
right?
And there's just the history has been very much overlooked, and it's such a rich history with all these stories and all these people and all these characters. And you were there for the beginning of it, and now you can kind of you're talking about it now, and it's night and day. It's you're talking about a local road race with 3,000 people for dogs' foot health or something versus you're out there running in 37 degrees in the streets of New York
with 60 people.
Yeah. So
exactly. Is there anything else we need to go over here at all?
No, I feel like we've covered, unless you wanted to add anything, but I'm just wondering, I guess 2 final questions would be your running role model or role models, and then also your own proudest running or race walking accomplishment.
Oh, wow.
2 big ones.
Role model. I look at that as not an individual per se. I look at it as a conglomeration of these people and others that I've met they kind of form a tribe for me. Um, and to see that en masse with all their individual personalities and all their individual capacities, and even role models who are not the fastest ones, some of the kindest ones, to be able to be there not only for me, but I've seen them be there for others. I think that is the spirit that has evolved the sport and established the foundation to begin with.
Hmm.
So that's how I would answer that.
I think that's kind of what you were saying with the, run for, run against. The spirit is not about the running, it's about the for or against. So you're
Yeah,
getting a different population who is interested in, whatever the race is about, but not
yeah,
necessarily the running itself. And you kind of lose some of that camaraderie,
exactly.
especially as you experienced it, but just even on a higher level, the camaraderie is about kind of the topic area and not the sport itself.
And again, I think that's totally okay in the sense that that's just where things are now.
Yep.
Um,
If
I've talked,
running's a vehicle to raise money for whatever, then that's great. It's just that's not what it was for you, and that's why running means something much different to you than it does to a lot of other people.
yeah, exactly. Um, I mean, for me, um, I don't want to overstate this, but it was almost like my founding religion. Um, I had a religion when I grew up, and I honored that, but this is where my soul was, with the Roadrunners Club. And these people who formulated the early church, if you will,
Hmm.
early church, um, actually helped me grow as a person and throughout my life as well.
And then your own proudest accomplishment as a runner or race walker.
I think staying with it, staying with it, despite all the things and pressures that life presents to us. The fact that I was a 12-year-old kid that got, quote, discovered by a high school coach to run around the field at the high school track and getting shin splints so severe I couldn't walk home from school. From that kid to being able to run my first race, to go to college, run on the team, to be able to do my marathon, first marathon, and then my best marathon in Philadelphia, to becoming someone who trained and had done numerous races, 31 marathon run, and then another 162 through race walking, and then all the ultras that I've done. I've done, I think, 863 half marathons.
Wow, yeah, we didn't even get into that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But all that stuff, my whole life, and despite anything that's come along, hardship, hard times, jobs, no jobs, money in, money out, all that stuff, and still staying with this as a constant in one form or another. What I say is my biggest accomplishment.
Yeah. I mean, it's been 60 years, 6 decades of running, race walking, whatever, in some capacity. That's incredible.
Like my mother said to me when I was like 13 years old, are you going to be doing this when you're 40 years old?
Say, look, Ma, here I am.
Uh-huh.
That's awesome. All right.
Sarah, it's been a delight. I appreciate this and
Thank you,
great
Dave.
to meet you.
Likewise. And I'll be
All
in
right.
touch for sure. I appreciate your time today and your memories. Thank you so much.
Good. Bye bye now.
Thank you. Bye.